When someone is taken into custody, it's important for them to know their legal rights. This morning, I'm joined by Khalil Parker, KC, and president of the Bahamas Bar Association, and Miranda Adderley, a member of the bar and criminal defense attorney, to discuss the rights of suspects while in custody. Good morning and welcome back to Bahamas at Sunrise.
Good morning. Thank you for having us again.
Yes, so why is it so important for people to understand their rights while in custody?
Well, I think it's important because we're back here with more things to talk about. But as you imagine, we are policed by consent. It's a very serious thing. Liberty is sacrosanct. And when your liberty is subjected to the power of the state, it is important that those with that authority understand that when you are in the custody of the state, they owe you a duty of care. They are to preserve your dignity and your fundamental rights, notwithstanding the fact that you're being subject to potential criminal proceedings and investigation. So it is important that you know going in that you don't lose your individuality and your substantive rights when you walk, and you lose your ability to move and carry yourself as you will, but while you're in the state's custody, they owe you a duty of care, and that your relationship with this situation is one where you are to leave, having been subjected to this process, with your dignity intact.
Yes, and also it's important to know that even if you're arrested and in custody, you are still innocent. You are still presumed innocent. The presumption of innocence continues all the way up until conviction or until you're found guilty or pled guilty. So even if you're being investigated for something, or even if you haven't been charged, or even if you have been charged, you are still presumed innocent. So I think that's also very important to keep to the forefront of the conversation. These persons are still innocent people by what the law has said, what the Constitution of the Bahamas has said. So why is it that upon arrest, it's almost as if you're already guilty, convicted, you've done it, period, and now you belong to us, is what it appears from what we've been seeing coming out through social media and video footages that's been leaked through these police arrests and conversations of persons who had been arrested and were suspects in police custody.
Yeah, Miranda touched on another point. I think that when you're charged and you're paraded and you're on the front page of the newspaper, people feel like that's the end of the story.
Right.
You don't always get the same level of coverage when there's vindication, when there's acquittal, when prosecution is stopped. And I think that we have to, as a society, determine that we respect the principles of the justice system, and we understand, yes, there is a public interest in knowing who is before the courts and what is before the courts, but we have to understand that that is just the beginning of the process. That's not the conclusion.
Exactly. Right. A lot of these matters end up with persons being acquitted. A lot of these matters end up with persons being, they withdraw the charges, nolli prosequis are presented. So all of these persons are still innocent, and to have an innocent person in police custody asking to use the restroom, as we've seen in one of the viral videos, and blatantly being denied that right to use the bathroom, to the fact where the person defecated a female in the police station, and then they go on to almost mock, antagonize, provoke the situation. I mean, it was just deplorable.
Absolutely. Now, you spoke about a duty of care and the rights that people can expect. But I mean, barring, watching a Law and Order or, Cops or any of those shows, we're actually more familiar word for word with the kinds of rights that folks would have in the United States. But in the Bahamas, what are those basic rights that people should know that they have?
Well, there's certain, in Western liberal democracies like our own, there are certain fundamental things. While we don't necessarily plead the fifth and all these other things, because that's not our documentation, there is a thread of consistency in terms of the standard of care with respect to persons in detention. And so the usual rights, like the fundamental rights in terms of the not to be abused, not to be denied access to facilities, those things carry over, the presumption of innocence. All of those things ring true. And again, like we say, if you are curious about it, reach out to an attorney, discuss these things. Don't take it for granted that what happened to you was lawful. You have a right to interrogate that process and determine for yourself on an informed basis whether they met the standard in that case.
Is there a streamlined center of information that someone could consult prior to being arrested? Like, I know is it in the law that someone has the right to use the restroom? Is it in the law that somebody has the right to, contact a loved one or an attorney?
There are certain aspects of this. Yes, you have a constitutional right to access to an attorney. Like we just recently had an issue when our member went to visit a person in detention and they were denied, and then it led to a charge of disorderly conduct, and we defend them. Ms. Adderley successfully defended our member and vindicated the right of an attorney to quite forcefully and robustly insist that the citizen has a right to access to an attorney. That is a fundamental principle, and it is the right of the detained person. They approach attorneys as if we're saying that, oh, because we're big bad attorneys, we can traipse through the police station. No, it is the right of the detained person, that it is our duty as the person who has liberty to insist that that right is vindicated.
But I think what you're saying is,
Yes.
is there a codified document that citizens can actually go to say this is the rights? And I think that it is not, it's piecemeal. I think that we do need to probably have one clear document or code of conduct or standard of conduct that is a document you could go to that says these are the rights of detained persons. These are the, expectations of police officers who are dealing with detained persons. Because it is sketchy. I mean, to think that a police officer was recording what was happening is shocking, because in their mind, they, I think, are trying to show how rude this lady is, or, highlight that she's using these racial slurs, not seeing that in actuality, when you look at this video, they are the ones who are really being, unhumane, who are really embarrassing, who are really, unprofessional in their duties. So even if she was using racial slurs, which we heard that she did, it paled in comparison to what they denied her right to use the bathroom. The fact that they're calling her a cokehead or come out the coke house. I mean, you're a police officer, you're not a judge, you're not a jury. This hasn't even been to trial. She hasn't even been charged, and this is how you're treating somebody. And only because we have the video footage, we know that. If a client comes or someone comes out in the media and says that, everyone says it's a lie. Right now we have the young gentleman who was the model for Bahari. He just got charged, I think, in an offense. And I see there's a GoFundMe going out complaining about when he was in custody, he had black eyes from the police punching him. He has a burn mark on his nose because they, burned him with a cigarette while in custody. These things are commonplace, and this is what we need the public to know.
Right. It seems like there's typically outrage on the back end. That's why I was curious to know if there is a resource, because it seems like in these cases, we don't know that we've crossed the line until the line is crossed. Or it's not clear that there's a problem until we have something really egregious, like that young lady not being able to use the restroom, like, a subject being physically abused with seemingly with receipts while in custody. So how do we prevent this from happening?
Well, I think that you highlighted a point, and it's something that we will take under advisement as the Minister of National Security recognize that what I acknowledged publicly, what was shown in that video was not acceptable and appeared to breach the protocols and orders of the police force. And we engage with the commissioner. What we'll do is seek to have a public engagement on that process so that people know their rights, and so we look forward to the Bar Association putting out information in that regard in collaboration with these entities, so you are empowered in advance. And the point is, again, to take the situation, if it is that somebody is in custody and they are alleged to be under the influence, instead of subjecting them to ridicule or treating them like as a person who is corpus mentis at the highest of their faculties, you have to treat them with extra care, we would say, and preserve them to make sure that they can face whatever consequences you say they ought to face for whatever conduct that led them into the station. Absolutely. But the ultimate objective of the Bar Association is to tease out these issues, and one of the things that we have discussed this morning is making sure that there is a place that we can say that you can go to see the explicit lines of responsibility and rights that you have in those contexts.
How do we work with the police? Because it seems like there is a us versus them. It seems like a lot of times when folks go into custody, there's already, like you said, there's a presumption of guilt, but there's almost an adversarial dynamic between the accused and those who are detaining them. First of all, what do those consequences look like in these cases where obviously, I saw something in the headline saying heads need to roll.
Yes.
But what do those real consequences look like for those police who've done?
I was following up on the story, and they said that one of the officers who had, I think, recorded that video with the young lady, has now been brought before the police tribunal for disciplinary hearings, with others possibly to follow, is what I've read. So, like we say, they are not, untouchable. They are also, under laws and under the same, jurisdiction that we have. So we're happy to see that the public is speaking out when these things happen. I'm happy that the family of Elias Fritz went and did the GoFundMe to explain his side of the story and what happened while he was in custody. I'm glad that even though it was not the person in custody who released the video, that the video was released to see how deplorable things get while these persons are in custody. And the more these things come out, the more the discussion has, the more pressure is put on the police to do better training of their officers, better engagement with the police officers and the public to ensure that these things, do not happen.
To your question also, we meet with the powers. We've had a meeting with the Commissioner of Police. We've spoken about training. We've spoken about public information exercises, as I said. So how do you address this? We have to engage with the organization, and that's what the Bar Association does, to shed light, to take down the temperature of these things, and to better serve the public on both sides of the equation. And so we're looking at things about cameras in police stations and all of these things, so that you don't have to rely on body cam once something is in the station, or the use of individual phones, so that there's an official record of somebody's time in custody.
Well, I feel like this is a very hot topic that we can talk about for a long time, but we are out of time. But if somebody or their loved one finds himself in this situation, how can they learn more? What resources?
Well, at their legal aid clinics, we should be scheduling one very shortly. They can call the Bar Association to register, 393-3220, or you can email president@bahamasbarassociation.com just to get on the list, or info@bahamasbarassociation.com, and you'll meet attorneys and you can talk about these things. But you can also reach out to an attorney that you know and trust and have that engagement. But those are the things that we do to make sure that the public has access to legal services on a consistent basis, on a pro bono basis.
Also, Eugene DePuche has a law clinic that is also free to the public. So if you have legal issues and you may not have the finances, then you can also approach the Eugene DePuche Law School, where you have law students who are willing and able to help and assist for free.
All right. Thank you so much for shedding light on this timely and very important topic. I'm sure that, I was enlightened. I'm sure that many of our viewers are now empowered to support their friends and loved ones. And thank you for being on the show.
Thank you for having us again.
And thank you for watching Bahamas at Sunrise. We'll be right back.